The camera
Don't
flashes
me,
erupted
Robert
in
here.
synchronized
You can't
bursts
do
across
this.
the Federal
It's not
Judicial
right.
Commission
Stand down.
hearing
This is
room,
procedure.
each strobe freezing Theodore Chambers in progressive stages of collapse. His silver hair hung in disarray, and the handcuffs around his wrists caught the fluorescent light with each involuntary tremor of his hands. For 9 years he had presided over this circuit from a position of unassailable authority. Now he stood before the same institution that had elevated him, reduced to a defendant awaiting judgment. 73 families. 30 years. The numbers had become a refrain repeated by journalists and prosecutors and victims until they carried the weight of an epitaph. His attorney had abandoned the pretense of strategy 10 minutes earlier, recognizing that no legal maneuvering could counter 400 pages of documentation and dozens of witnesses prepared to testify. At the back of the room, partially concealed by a marble pillar inscribed with the words, "Equal justice under law," a man in judicial robes observed without expression. Marcus Ashford had waited 47 years for this moment without knowing it existed. His hands remained clasped behind his back, steady as they had been through 12 years on the federal bench, through the death of his wife and the solitary labor of raising their daughter. Chambers found him in the crowd. Their eyes met across 60 feet of polished floor, and something passed between them that transcended the official proceedings. Recognition of what had been hidden, acknowledgement of what had been lost. The terrible arithmetic of consequences finally being calculated. 3 months ago, Theodore Chambers had not known that Marcus Ashford was a federal judge. He had dismissed the complaint from the parking garage as another problem to be buried, another voice to be silenced through the machinery he had spent decades perfecting. 3 months ago, Theodore Chambers had not known that Marcus Ashford was the nephew of Marcus Ashford Sr., the man Chambers had sentenced to 8 years in 1997 for a crime constructed from planted evidence and suppressed testimony. Now he knew everything. The knowing had destroyed him. Marcus offered the slightest nod and acknowledgement so subtle that no observer perceived it. Then he turned and walked through the rear doors, leaving Theodore Chambers to face the consequences alone. The screen faded to black and white text appeared against the darkness. 3 months earlier. The morning of March 15th began, the way all of Marcus Ashford's mornings began, in the pre-dawn stillness of a 2-bedroom apartment in Miami's Kendall district. The rent was $800 monthly, modest for a federal judge earning $180,000 annually, but Marcus had never pursued the trappings of his position. The money served purposes that mattered more than square footage or prestigious addresses. His body woke at 5:48 without mechanical assistance. 12 years on the bench had calibrated his internal clock with precision no device could match. He lay motionless for a moment, registering the silence, feeling the empty expanse beside him in the queen bed that still seemed designed for 2 people rather than 1. The ceiling fan rotated overhead, stirring air that carried the faint scent of lavender fabric softener. Denise had always used that brand. 4 years after her death, he still purchased it. Some continuities were too precious to abandon. He rose and moved through darkness to the kitchen, measuring coffee grounds by touch, starting the machine, then standing at the window, while the sky shifted through gradations of gray toward the first intimations of dawn. The Miami skyline glittered in the distance, towers full of people beginning their own mornings unaware of the judge watching them from his modest apartment in the working-class neighborhood he had chosen deliberately. The coffee finished. He poured a cup black unsweetened and carried it down the hallway to the door decorated with hand-drawn stars and a construction paper sign reading, "Zola's Room. Scientists Only." She was sleeping when he eased the door open. 8 years old and small for her age, her face pressed into the pillow, her arms wrapped around a worn teddy bear dressed in a miniature black robe. Judge Bear, she called him. The final gift Denise had given her before the accident, purchased from a courthouse gift shop as a joke that had become sacred. Her gap-toothed smile was visible even in sleep, a slight upturn at the corners of her mouth, suggesting pleasant dreams. Marcus leaned against the doorframe and watched her breathe, this child who had become the axis around which his entire existence rotated. Denise had died 4 years ago on a Tuesday afternoon when a delivery truck ran a red light on Coral Way while she was driving home from the community center. The doctor said the impact was instantaneous, that she felt nothing. Marcus had never believed them, but he told Zola the same story because certain truths were too heavy for children to carry. He never elaborated beyond necessity. There was only the photograph on his nightstand, Denise laughing at their wedding reception, and the gold band he had never removed from his left hand. Zola stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, that particular shade of brown inherited directly from her mother, and her smile widened when she recognized him in the doorway. "Daddy?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "You're watching me again." He crossed the room and settled on the edge of her bed, brushing a braid away from her face. "Just making sure you're real." She bolted upright, drowsiness evaporating. "Today's my science fair. My presentation is at 3:45. The project had consumed their evenings for 3 weeks. A model of the solar system with planets suspended from a wire frame, each one painted according to NASA photographs Zola had printed at the public library. She had insisted on accuracy researching Jupiter's storm gradients, Neptune's atmospheric composition, the precise rust orange of Martian soil. His daughter, the scientist, 8 years old and already more focused than most adults he encountered professionally. Her hand found his small fingers wrapping around his palm. "You'll be there, right? You promised." The docket materialized in his mind. Motion hearing at 9, sentencing at 11, oral arguments at 2. None could be rescheduled. All of them paled against the importance of watching his daughter explain planetary orbits to a gymnasium full of parents. He squeezed her hand. "I'll be there." "Promise?" "Bigger than the sky, baby girl." The phrase was their inheritance, their private language words Denise had invented during Zola's toddler years to describe commitments too vast for ordinary measurement. It had survived the accident passed between father and daughter like something precious and irreplaceable. Zola's smile showed the gap where her front teeth were growing in. "Bigger than the sky." He kissed her forehead and left her to prepare for school, returning to the kitchen to finish his coffee and review the day's calendar. The courthouse schedule showed nothing unusual. Motion hearing in a drug possession case, sentencing for aggravated assault, employment discrimination arguments, the predictable rhythm of justice that had defined his professional existence for more than a decade. At 6:22, he gathered his briefcase, checked his appearance in the hallway mirror, and moved toward the door. Zola was in the bathroom water running, her voice carrying an off-key melody into the living room. He paused at the kitchen table, examining the mail he had not yet opened. The electric bill sat on top. $127. Below it, water at $43. Below that, the invoice for Zola's summer science camp, $450, circled in red with DU stamped across the amount. His phone displayed his checking balance, $127.34. Nearly identical to the electric bill, a coincidence that produced a grim smile. Not because he lacked resources. A federal judge earning his salary was far from impoverished, but 60% of each paycheck transferred automatically to the Denise Ashford Scholarship Fund, a foundation he had established to provide educational support for orphaned children throughout Miami-Dade County. 12 kids annually received complete funding for camp's tutoring supplies, whatever they required to succeed academically. 12 children who had lost parents just as Zola had lost her mother. The money mattered more there than in his personal account. Denise would have understood. Denise would have insisted. He pulled on his jacket gray tweed that had seen better years and stepped into the Miami morning. The drive to the federal courthouse consumed 31 minutes in light traffic, accompanied by NPR murmuring through speakers of his decade-old Honda Civic. He had purchased the car used when Zola was 3, paid it off within 2 years, and found no compelling reason to replace it with something more impressive. Judges who drove luxury vehicles attracted attention he preferred to avoid. The radio transitioned from weather to local news, and a familiar name caught his attention. The discrimination lawsuit against Thornton Construction continues today, with CEO Bradley Thornton expected to testify in his own defense. The company faces allegations of systematic wage theft affecting over 200 workers, primarily Hispanic laborers, on residential developments throughout Miami-Dade County. Thornton has denied all allegations, characterizing the lawsuit as a shakedown orchestrated by union organizers. Marcus reached for the dial, then hesitated. Thornton Construction. The name circulated through courthouse gossip, appeared on vehicles perpetually parked somewhere on the judicial complex, attached itself to donations supporting every significant political campaign in the region. Bradley Thornton moved through Miami like a man who owned substantial portions of it, because in many respects he did. The broadcast shifted to traffic reports. Marcus followed the current of vehicles toward downtown, his thoughts already organizing around the Reynolds motion hearing. At 6:51, he turned onto the street leading to the judicial parking garage, the secured facility reserved for judges and senior court officials. A concrete barrier blocked the entrance. Behind the barrier, 3 white trucks idled in reserved spaces, their sides displaying red lettering. Thornton Construction. A crane extended over the adjacent building, and workers in hard hats clustered around machinery that had no legitimate reason for occupying that location on a Tuesday morning. Marcus lowered his window as a foreman approached a heavy-set man with a clipboard and visible disinterest in the obstruction he was causing. "Garage is closed." The foreman barely glanced at him. "Construction." Marcus indicated his judicial parking placard. "I'm a federal judge. I use this facility daily." The foreman shrugged, already turning away. "Take it up with whoever approved the permits. We're here through Thursday." The window rose on any further exchange. Marcus studied the trucks blocking his designated space, the crane swinging overhead, the indifference of workers who appeared unaware they were inconveniencing a member of the federal judiciary, or perhaps they understood precisely what they were doing. He circled the block twice, searching for street parking that did not exist within a quarter-mile of the courthouse. The public garage at 3rd and Flagler offered 4-hour maximums barely sufficient for his morning docket, but alternatives were limited, and his first hearing approached. He entered the public structure at 6:53, ascending to level 2, where several spaces remained available in the early morning emptiness. Slot 247 sat beneath a flickering fluorescent tube, a concrete pillar rising beside it. Marcus guided the Civic into position and killed the engine. Silence filled the car, interrupted only by the ventilation system's distant hum and the tick of cooling metal. He collected his briefcase, verified his phone showed no urgent messages, and stepped into the dim light. A white pickup truck occupied a space 3 slots distant, engine running, exhaust curling through the still air. Through the windshield, 2 figures watched him with an intensity that registered somewhere in his awareness as unusual. He dismissed the observation. People watching was ordinary behavior. Not everything constituted a threat. His footsteps echoed against concrete as he walked toward the elevator, briefcase in hand, mind already rehearsing the arguments he would encounter in the Reynolds motion. The defense claimed procedural violations in the search warrant. The prosecution had filed a rebuttal citing emergency circumstances. Neither position was particularly compelling, but the law demanded careful attention regardless. Behind him, a car door opened and closed. He continued walking. Heavy footsteps followed, accelerating beyond casual pace, the rhythm of someone determined to intercept. "Hey!" The voice bounced off concrete pillars and died somewhere in the fluorescent hum. "You." Marcus did not turn. Experience had taught him nothing productive emerged from engaging strangers in parking structures. The elevator was 30 feet ahead. He would reach it, press the button, and depart before any conversation could develop. "I'm talking to you, boy." The word landed with physical impact, carrying centuries of weight in a single syllable. Marcus had encountered it before countless times, in countless variations. From teachers who expected less of him, from colleagues who underestimated him, from defendants who could not accept that a black man held authority over their fate. He stopped walking. The man approaching was tall, over 6 feet, with a thick neck straining against his blue polo collar. His face was flushed with something internal, a heat radiating outward like a furnace burning beyond safe limits. Behind him, a woman with ash-blonde hair clutched a designer purse, her phone already raised, her lips moving in what appeared to be rehearsal. Bradley Thornton. Marcus recognized him from news coverage, from photographs accompanying society pages whenever the construction magnate attended charitable functions. The man whose trucks currently blocked the judicial parking garage. Bradley closed the distance, stopping near enough that Marcus could smell coffee on his breath. This garage is for authorized personnel. Court business only. His eyes moved across Marcus from head to foot, cataloging the worn jacket, the aged briefcase, the absence of visible credentials. You don't look like you have court business. Marcus maintained level tones. I'm a court visitor. Posted hours are 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. The current time is 7:12. Bradley's expression narrowed, calculation concluding in contempt. Court visitor? What kind of court business does someone like you have? Someone like you. The coded vocabulary of prejudice sanitized for plausible deniability, vague enough to evade explicit accusation. Marcus had built prosecutions around such phrases. He understood their precise meaning. The woman stepped forward, phone pressed to her ear, voice pitched with performative alarm. Yes. Hello, 911. There's a suspicious black male in the courthouse parking garage. Level 2. He's acting suspicious, won't identify himself. We asked politely and he became aggressive. He might be checking cars for valuables. 7:15. Marcus noted the time automatically, a habit developed through years of documenting testimony and establishing timelines. He noted the tremor in her hand, adrenaline rather than genuine fear. He noted Bradley's positioning between himself and the elevator, blocking forward progress. He remained stationary, did not raise his voice, did not reach for phone or wallet or any object that might be misinterpreted. He simply observed, cataloging every detail with the precision of someone who had spent a career analyzing evidence. Bradley moved closer, close enough that his shadow fell across Marcus's face, close enough that the encounter could not be characterized as casual inquiry. Let me explain something. The voice dropped toward something intended as threatening. My company built half the structures in this county. I know every judge, every clerk, every security officer in this courthouse, and I've never seen you before. So either you produce identification immediately, or I make one phone call and you explain yourself to police. The sensation settling into Marcus's chest was not fear. It was something older. Something he had learned to carry from age 7, when a store clerk followed him through aisles certain he intended to steal. Something refined at 22, when a law professor asked if he was there to clean the classroom. Something calcified into armor by the time he took the bench, and defense attorneys questioned whether a black judge could deliver impartial rulings. He permitted silence to extend, observing Bradley's confidence waver fractionally at the absence of expected reaction. Then he spoke with the measured cadence he employed when delivering verdicts. I have no legal obligation to present identification in a public parking structure. Posted notices permit court visitors during designated hours. I am a court visitor. That exhausts what I owe you. Bradley's complexion darkened, blood rising beneath skin. You think you're clever. Reading signs citing rules that makes you belong here. I don't require belonging. I require access to that elevator. You're obstructing my path. Marcus stepped forward. Bradley remained stationary. The assault occurred at 7:17. Bradley seized Marcus's left arm above the elbow fingers, excavating into muscle, and twisted. The motion was practiced, efficient, suggesting familiarity with physical intimidation. Marcus's briefcase dropped from his grip. His body rotated involuntarily as Bradley drove him backward into the concrete pillar beside slot 247. The back of his skull struck concrete with a sound that seemed to echo through the empty structure. Pain bloomed from the impact point, sharp and immediate, radiating down his neck into his shoulders. His files scattered across the floor, manila folders splaying open documents sliding beneath parked vehicles. His reading glasses tucked into his jacket pocket fell to concrete. One lens fractured on impact, spiderweb cracks spreading across the glass. He did not fall. His hand found the pillar, steadying himself against rough concrete, and he remained upright through determination alone. The ringing in his ears subsided after several seconds, replaced by Bradley's heavy breathing and the distant chatter of the woman still performing for the dispatcher. Bradley stood over him, one hand raised, prepared for additional force if necessary. "Now, are you leaving, or do I need to assist you?" Marcus looked at him, at the flushed face and clenched fist, an absolute certainty of a man who believed he controlled this encounter. Then he unlocked his phone with his thumb. Alarm flickered across Bradley's features. "What are you doing calling 911? Your wife already contacted them." "They'll have two accounts. Mine will differ substantially." He pressed the call button before Bradley could respond. The dispatcher's voice was professional neutral. "Miami-Dade 911. What is your emergency?" Marcus kept his eyes fixed on Bradley, kept his voice steady despite the throbbing at the base of his skull. "I'm in the courthouse parking garage level 2 near slot 247. I've just been assaulted by a white male, approximately 6'2", 220 pounds, wearing a blue polo shirt. He pushed me into a concrete pillar. His wife is present and has called 911 with what I expect will be a contradictory account. My name is—" Bradley lunged. His hand closed around Marcus's wrist, squeezing hard enough to leave marks. "Hang up. Hang up immediately." The dispatcher's voice crackled with concern. Sir, are you still there? Can you provide more specific location details?" Marcus did not break eye contact with Bradley. "I'm still here. The subject is now gripping my wrist. I am not resisting. I am standing still. I need officers dispatched to my location immediately." "Sir, remain on the line. I'm sending a unit now." Bradley released him as if burned, stepping backward, something resembling uncertainty crossing his face for the first time since the encounter began. "You're lying. You attacked me. Lydia witnessed it. She'll tell them what actually happened." Marcus lowered the phone without ending the call. "She'll tell them what she wants them to believe. Whether they find her credible is a separate question." The elevator chimed behind them. All three heads turned. The doors opened to reveal a man in khaki uniform badge on his chest, security stitched above his pocket. His nameplate read Porter G. His employee number, visible on a laminated card at his belt, was 4417. Gerald Porter had supervised courthouse security for 11 years. He had encountered everything this building could produce, from intoxicated defendants to grieving families, to attorneys exchanging blows in hallways. He had learned to assess situations in seconds, resolve them in minutes, and document them in ways that protected institutional interests above all else. This situation presented clearly. He observed Bradley, white, well-dressed, face red with righteous indignation. He observed Lydia, white, well-dressed, phone pressed to ear, obviously the responsible party who had summoned assistance. He observed Marcus, black, disheveled, files scattered around him like evidence of wrongdoing. The conclusion was apparent. Porter approached Marcus, hand resting casually on the radio at his belt. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step over here." Marcus raised his phone call, still connected. "I've already contacted 911. I want to file a formal report." Porter's expression remained unchanged. "We'll address that. First, let's separate everyone and establish calm." "I am calm. I've remained calm throughout. I was assaulted while standing in a public parking structure, and I want to file a report. Porter glanced at Bradley and Lydia at the files scattered across concrete. His gaze lingered on the fractured glasses, the manila folders, the briefcase lying on its side. Whatever calculation occurred concluded in Bradley's favor. "Sir, tell me what happened." Before Marcus could respond, Bradley stepped forward, voice transformed into something measured and reasonable. "We were walking to the courthouse when we noticed this man behaving suspiciously, examining vehicles, looking around. My wife felt uncomfortable, so I approached to offer assistance. He became hostile, aggressive. When I attempted to de-escalate, he grabbed my arm. I defended myself. Every word was fabricated. Every word was delivered with the confidence of a man who expected his version to prevail. Marcus's voice remained steady. "That is not what occurred." Porter raised a hand. "Sir, I'll take your statement momentarily. You'll take it now, or you'll take it from the officers when they arrive." Something flickered in Porter's eyes, a calculation adjusting to unexpected resistance. "Let's not escalate this beyond what's necessary." "I'm not escalating anything. I'm describing events. A man assaulted me, seized my arm, shoved me into a concrete pillar. His wife called 911 and reported me as suspicious. I have a bruise forming on my arm and possible head trauma from the impact. That's not a misunderstanding. That's battery under Florida Statute 784.03. Porter blinked. Bradley shifted his weight. Lydia's grip on her phone tightened. Something passed between them. Husband-wife security supervisor. The silent recalibration of people who had underestimated their target. Porter's voice grew careful. "Sir, let's avoid making legal accusations without—" "I'm not making accusations. I'm citing applicable law. Whether charges result depends entirely on documentation." Marcus bent and began collecting his files one by one, methodical, unhurried, projecting an impression of unlimited time. His head throbbed, his arm ached, his glasses were destroyed. None of it registered in his movements. Bradley watched hands opening and closing at his sides. "This is absurd. Lydia, let's go. We have a hearing." Porter's voice stopped him. "Sir, I'll need you to wait until I've documented the incident." "Document what? He attacked me." "Do you have visible injuries, sir?" Bradley's face went still. Porter continued, tone neutral. "That's what I thought." He turned to Marcus. "Sir, I'm going to need your name for the report." Marcus straightened files, gathered damaged glasses tucked into his pocket. "Marcus Ashford. A-S-H-F-O. And you're here on court business." "I am." "What type?" Their eyes met. Marcus searched the security supervisor's face for recognition or understanding. He found only practiced neutrality, the mask of someone trained to see what he was told to see. "The type I'll discuss with officers when they arrive." Porter reached for his radio. What happened next would be preserved on Porter's body camera footage, later retrieved under discovery and entered as Exhibit 14. 7:22 a.m. Badge number 441-7. Porter's voice was flat, professional. "Dispatch, this is Porter at Level 2 parking. Situation is Code 4. Handled. Cancel response." The dispatcher's acknowledgement crackled through. "Copy that. Canceling dispatch." The exchange lasted 8 seconds. Marcus heard every word. He heard Porter cancel the response to his emergency call. He heard Porter decide unilaterally that whatever had happened did not warrant police involvement. 11 years Gerald Porter had worked in this building. 73 times he had made similar decisions, canceling dispatches, dismissing complaints, handling situations in ways that protected certain people while discarding others. 73 times, and Marcus knew nothing about any of them. Not yet. You canceled my dispatch. Porter clipped the radio to his belt. I assessed the situation. It's handled. It's not handled. I was assaulted. I want to file a report. You can file with courthouse administration. 3rd floor, room 312. I'll note the incident in my log. Your log? Yes, sir. Marcus studied him, the face arranged in professional neutrality, the hand resting near the radio, the positioning in the space. Between Marcus and the Thorntons, yes. But also between Marcus and the elevator. Not protecting. Containing. I'd like your badge number for my records. It's on my uniform, sir. 4417. And your supervisor's name? Something flickered across Porter's features, the first fracture in his professional mask. Captain Torres, but I don't think... Thank you. Marcus adjusted his briefcase strap, wincing at the pull against his bruised arm. I'll be filing a formal complaint. You'll receive notification. He walked past Porter, past Bradley, standing frozen with an expression mixing confusion and dawning concern. Past Lydia, whose phone hung loose at her side with the performance apparently concluded. He pressed the elevator button. The doors opened immediately. He stepped inside, turned, and faced them all. You should understand something about the statute you referenced. His voice carried the calm authority he employed from the bench. Florida Law 789.09 requires both posted notice and refusal to depart. I was never asked to leave until after the assault occurred. Your confrontation was unlawful from inception. The doors began closing. Have a productive day in court. The final image was Bradley Thornton's face, pale beneath the flush, wearing the expression of someone who had just recognized the magnitude of his error. The 3rd floor of the Miami-Dade Federal Courthouse carried the permanent scent of old documents and fresh anxiety, a combination Marcus had long since stopped noticing. He passed the security checkpoint, nodding to the guard who waved him through without examining his briefcase, and proceeded toward administrative offices. His head throbbed with each step. The base of his skull felt tender and swollen, the kind of injury requiring ice and rest and medical attention he lacked time to pursue. The science fair commenced at 3:15. Zola's presentation was scheduled for 3:45. He would not miss it for any consideration, not for 1,000 Bradley Thorntons, not for injuries twice as severe. But first, documentation. There was always documentation. The administrative intake office occupied a beige room with fluorescent lighting and a counter staffed by a woman in her mid-30s. Her nameplate identified her as Nancy Palmer, Administrative Specialist. Her expression when Marcus approached shifted through recognition toward something less easily categorized. He dispensed with pleasantries. I need to file an incident report. Nancy's fingers hovered above her keyboard. What kind of incident? Assault. In the parking garage approximately 20 minutes ago. Her eyes traveled across his face, registering the slight dishevelment, the tension in his jaw, the way he favored his left arm. Whatever assessment she conducted did not reach her expression. And your name, Marcus Ashford. The flicker was unmistakable. Recognition quickly suppressed. She knew who he was. Her tone maintained professionalism. I see. And you're visiting the courthouse today for what purpose? Court business. Which courtroom? That's not relevant to an incident report. Nancy's mouth compressed. Mr. Ashford, these reports can become complicated for everyone involved. Are you certain you want to proceed? The sensation in Marcus's chest intensified. He recognized the warning for what it represented. An attempt to discourage, minimize, make the problem vanish before it could grow inconvenient. His voice did not rise. His hands did not shake. He spoke the way he spoke from the bench, with the absolute authority of someone who understood the law better than those attempting to apply it. I was assaulted. I have a bruise forming on my arm and possible head trauma. A security supervisor canceled my 911 dispatch without taking my statement. I am entirely certain I want to proceed. Nancy began typing keystrokes, slow and reluctant. Date of incident: today. Time: 7:17 a.m. Location: Level 2 parking structure near slot 247. Description of assailant: white male, approximately 6'2", 220 pounds, wearing a blue polo shirt. His wife was present and made a false 911 report. Security Supervisor Gerald Porter, badge number 4417, canceled police dispatch and declined to take my statement. The typing continued, Nancy's face arranged in careful neutrality that did not entirely conceal her discomfort. And what exactly do you allege occurred? Marcus leaned forward slightly close enough that she would have to meet his eyes. I don't allege. I'm reporting. The male subject seized my left arm, twisted it, and drove me backward into a concrete pillar. I struck my head on impact. My belongings were scattered. I called 911 during the assault. Did you provoke the confrontation in any manner? His palm flattened on the counter. I walked toward an elevator while black. Is that what you're asking? Nancy's face colored. I have to ask these questions. Standard procedure. Then ask them, but record my answers precisely as given. I did not provoke. I did not escalate. I was standing in a public parking structure holding my briefcase, walking toward an elevator. I was stopped, accused of trespassing, and assaulted when I declined to produce identification. I'll need your contact information for follow-up. He provided it. Phone number, address, email, and your connection to the courthouse for our records. Marcus paused. In his mind, two paths diverged. The first led to immediate revelation, to Nancy's expression transforming to institutional machinery, grinding into motion on his behalf. The second led to silence, to observing how far the system would go to dismiss him before learning the truth. He chose the second path. I'm connected to court business. That's sufficient for your records. Nancy's jaw tightened. Sir, when can I expect confirmation that this report has been filed? A hesitation nearly imperceptible. Reports are reviewed by the administrative supervisor within 72 hours. You'll receive written confirmation following that review. 72 hours. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand standard procedure. I also understand that security footage in the parking structure auto-deletes after 72 hours. Administrative Order 2019-14, Section 4B. If that footage is not preserved before deletion, I will be filing a supplemental complaint for spoliation of evidence. Nancy's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I'll flag it for immediate review. Please do. He turned and walked out of the office, briefcase clutched in his uninjured hand, head pounding with each step. Behind him, he heard Nancy reach for the phone, her voice low and urgent. Captain Torres, this is Nancy in admin. We have a situation. The situation was about to become considerably more complicated. 47 minutes following the assault, Judge Marcus Ashford took the bench in courtroom 6A of the Miami-Dade Federal Courthouse. He had stopped in the private judicial restroom to examine his injuries. The bruise on his arm had darkened to purple, 4 distinct fingerprints where Bradley's grip had excavated. The back of his head was tender, but not bleeding. A swelling forming beneath his close-cropped hair. He would require ice. He would require aspirin. He would require a medical examination to document everything properly. Later, after the hearings, after the science fair, after Zola went to bed, and he could finally sit alone with the weight of what had occurred. He slipped into his robe's black fabric, settling across his shoulders like armor of a different nature, and entered the courtroom through the rear door. All rise. The bailiff's voice rang through the chamber. The United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida is now in session. The Honorable Marcus Ashford presiding. He took his seat, arranged his files, surveyed the assembled attorneys and observers. The defendant in the Reynolds case occupied the defense table, a young man barely 22 facing drug charges that could define his remaining years. The prosecutor organized papers. The court reporter positioned hands over the stenotype. Routine, predictable. Another Tuesday morning in the machinery of justice, except for the bruise concealed beneath his robe, except for the incident report awaiting attention on Nancy Palmer's desk, except for Bradley Thornton somewhere in the building at this moment, perhaps in another courtroom, addressing his own legal difficulties, entirely unaware that the man he had shoved into a pillar was now wearing judicial robes 3 floors above. Marcus called the first case, his voice steady, his demeanor unchanged. We will hear arguments in the matter of United States versus Reynolds. Counsel for the defense, is your client prepared to proceed? The morning continued. At 11:42 a.m., Marcus returned to his chambers, following the Reynolds hearing. The defense motion had been denied on procedural grounds. The evidence admitted the case proceeding toward trial. Standard outcome for standard arguments. His judicial assistant Terry met him at the door with an expression combining confusion and concern. "Judge, there's a Gerald Porter from security here to see you." Marcus set down his briefcase. "Send him in." Porter entered the chambers like a man navigating a minefield, each step careful, each movement deliberate. The professional confidence from the garage had evaporated, replaced by something resembling fear. He stopped 3 feet from Marcus's desk. "Judge Ashford, I didn't realize this morning when we spoke. I had no idea who you were." Marcus remained standing. "And if you had known," Porter faltered, "I would have handled things differently." "How differently would you have taken my statement? Would you have dispatched a unit? Would you have treated me with basic respect afforded to any citizen reporting an assault? I came to apologize for any misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding." Something in Marcus's tone stopped Porter mid-sentence. "There's an incident report on file. There's a request for footage preservation. There's a 911 recording with your voice-canceling police dispatch. Judge Ashford, if I'd known..." "You're telling me your treatment of assault victims depends on their professional status, that a citizen without judicial credentials would have been dismissed while a judge receives your concern." Porter's face had gone pale. "I came to make this right." "You came to protect yourself." Marcus settled into his chair. "What happens now is beyond your control. You'll return to your post. You'll wait for internal affairs contact. You'll retain counsel if you consider it warranted. And you'll think carefully about how you document this conversation in your personal notes, because I'll be documenting it in mine." Porter stood motionless for an extended moment. Then he turned and departed without another word. Alone in his chambers, Marcus looked at the photograph on his desk. Denise and Zola at the beach 3 months before the accident, laughing at something beyond the frame. His wife's eyes sparkled with the joy that had defined her, the optimism that believed the world could be improved through small acts of courage and kindness. She would have been proud of him today. She would have been furious about what happened, and she would have insisted he pursue justice not for himself, but for everyone who had encountered Gerald Porter without the protection of a federal judgeship. He opened his laptop and began typing. By 1:30 that afternoon, Marcus had submitted a formal Freedom of Information Act request for all complaints filed against Gerald Porter over the previous decade. He had contacted Patricia Okonkwo, his former law school classmate, who now practiced civil rights law, asking her to preserve available evidence through proper legal channels. He had photographed the bruise on his arm, using his phone camera, creating a time-stamped record. The response to his FOIA request arrived faster than anticipated, expedited by someone who recognized his name and understood the implications of delay. By 2:15, he was staring at his laptop screen, examining numbers that transformed a single morning's injustice into something far larger. 73 complaints against Gerald Porter over 6 years. 73 individuals who had reported discriminatory treatment harassment, false accusations, Excessive force. 73 people, every single one of them. Black, who had entered the Miami-Dade courthouse seeking justice and encountered a security supervisor who determined they did not belong. Every complaint had been marked resolved, no action required. Every complaint had been filed in connection with a case heard by Chief Judge Theodore Chambers. Marcus scrolled through the data, his legal mind automatically organizing patterns, identifying connections, constructing the framework of a case extending far beyond his own experience. Average hearing time for Black defendants in Chambers's courtroom, 2.3 minutes. For white defendants, 5.1 minutes. Statistical variance, 122%, a disparity that could not be explained by case complexity or procedural differences. Someone had been systematically denying justice to Black citizens for years. Porter at the entrance, Chambers on the bench, coordinated effort to minimize, dismiss, and destroy anyone who resembled Marcus Ashford. His phone buzzed with a text message from the main office at Zola's elementary school. The message was brief. "Mr. Ashford, please call us regarding an incident involving Zola." His heart stopped. He was dialing before conscious thought could intervene, phone pressed to his ear, the courtroom and statistics and bruises all forgotten in the sudden terror of a parent who recognizes something has gone wrong with their child. The school secretary answered on the second ring. "Lincoln Elementary." His voice emerged steadier than he felt. "This is Marcus Ashford. I received a message about my daughter Zola." A pause. Papers shuffling. "Yes, Mr. Ashford. Principal Henderson would like to speak with you. Can you come to the school?" "Is she hurt? What happened?" Another pause longer. "She's not injured, sir, but there was an incident during recess. The principal feels it's best discussed in person." The line went dead before he could ask anything else. Marcus stood in his Chambers phone still pressed to his ear, staring at the photograph of Denise and Zola on his desk. His daughter's gap-toothed smile beamed back at him, innocent and joyful, unaware that the world contained people who would harm her simply for existing. Whatever had happened at that school, whatever incident had prompted that careful, evasive phone call, Marcus understood with sudden certainty that it connected to everything else. The Thorntons in the garage, Porter's dismissal, the 73 complaints buried in courthouse files. A pattern was emerging, extending beyond buildings and institutions into places where children learned and played. A sickness in the culture that contaminated everything it touched. He gathered his things and headed for the door. The science fair would wait. His daughter could not. Outside his window, the Miami skyline glittered beneath a cloudless sky. Somewhere in that city, Bradley Thornton was consulting with attorneys. Somewhere, Gerald Porter was contemplating his career. Somewhere, Theodore Chambers was signing orders and hearing cases, unaware that his 30-year conspiracy was beginning to unravel. And somewhere in a school gymnasium decorated with poster board presentations and proud parents, an 8-year-old girl with her mother's eyes was learning that the world could be cruel to people who looked like her. Marcus walked out of the courthouse and into the uncertain afternoon, carrying bruises on his body and determination in his heart, not knowing that the fight he had begun would consume the next several months and change the federal judiciary forever. What he did know with the certainty that had sustained him through every trial and tribulation was that he would protect his daughter. He would expose the corruption. He would honor his uncle's memory and his wife's legacy, whatever it cost. Bigger than the sky. The hallways of Lincoln Elementary carried the permanent scent of floor wax and finger paint, a combination that transported Marcus to his own childhood with sudden clarity. He had walked these linoleum corridors countless times over 3 years, delivering Zola, retrieving her, attending conferences where teachers praised her curiosity and kindness. Never once had he received a call like the one that brought him here now. Principal Henderson's office occupied a corner of the administrative wing, its door flanked by construction paper artwork and motivational posters, featuring cartoon animals, encouraging literacy. Marcus pushed through without knocking. Zola sat in a chair too large for her small frame legs dangling above the floor, hands clutching fragments of what had been a model solar system. Saturn's rings were fractured. Jupiter had lost its great red spot. Neptune hung from a single wire spinning slowly in the recycled air. Her eyes were red, but dry tears already spent. When she saw her father in the doorway, her lower lip trembled with the effort of maintaining composure no child should need. Principal Henderson rose from behind her desk, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and the practiced expression of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. "Mr. Ashford, thank you for coming quickly. Please sit down." Marcus did not sit. He crossed to his daughter and knelt beside her chair, his hands finding hers, the damaged model cradled between them. His voice was soft, meant only for her. "Baby girl, tell me." Zola's composure crumbled. The story emerged in fragments punctuated by hitching breaths. She had been on the playground during morning recess preparing her project for final review before the afternoon science fair. A boy named Tommy had approached with two friends surrounding her, blocking her path to the school building. Tommy's father was someone important, she explained. Tommy had said so many times. His father knew everyone owned everything, could make anyone disappear if they caused problems. Tommy had looked at her project, at the carefully painted planets and the wire frame she had bent with her own hands, and he had pushed it off the table onto concrete. The words that followed were worse than the destruction. Her voice dropped to barely audible. "He said people like me don't belong at this school. He said his daddy says we're taking everything that should be theirs." People like me. The same coded vocabulary. The same poison passed between generations, father to son, spreading through culture like a virus without cure. Marcus felt something break inside him, a dam constructed through years of professional composure and personal discipline. The bruise on his arm throbbed in sympathy. The swelling on his skull pulsed with renewed intensity. But those injuries paled against the wound being inflicted on his daughter, damage that would scar in ways no medicine could address. He gathered the damaged model from her hands and set it aside, then pulled her into an embrace she returned with desperate strength. "Listen to me." His mouth was close to her ear, his voice fierce with love and fury barely contained. "What that boy said is wrong. It's a lie. You belong everywhere you choose to be, everywhere your mind and heart take you. No one decides otherwise." Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. "But he destroyed my project." 3 weeks, Daddy. I worked on it for 3 weeks. Then we'll construct a better one. Together. Tonight, after dinner. There's no time. The fair is in 2 hours. Marcus pulled back, holding her at arm's length, looking into eyes that were purely Denise. "Then you'll present what you have. You'll explain what happened. And you'll demonstrate that destruction doesn't win. That people who tear things down are always smaller than people who build." Principal Henderson cleared her throat. "Mr. Ashford, I want to assure you we take incidents like this very seriously. Tommy Henderson has received a disciplinary referral and his parents have been contacted." The name registered. Tommy Henderson. The principal's surname was Henderson, a connection too obvious to dismiss as coincidence. Marcus rose slowly, turning to face the woman whose professional mask had developed visible cracks. "Tommy Henderson. Any relation?" A pause lasting a beat too long. "He's my nephew. My brother's son." The implications cascaded through Marcus's mind. The principal's nephew had attacked his daughter. The disciplinary referral was being processed by the boy's own aunt. The system was compromised before it could begin. And what exactly does a disciplinary referral entail for the nephew of the person issuing it? "Mr. Ashford, I assure you that family relationships have no bearing. Does it entail suspension, expulsion, or does it entail a conversation with his parents that produces no meaningful consequences while my daughter carries this memory indefinitely?" The silence that followed provided his answer. Marcus took Zola's hand and helped her from the chair, gathering her project remnants. "We'll attend the science fair this afternoon. My daughter will present her work damaged as it is. And tomorrow morning I'll be filing a formal complaint with the school board regarding this incident's handling." He led Zola toward the door, then stopped and turned back one final time. "You should understand something about me, Principal Henderson. I'm not the kind of parent who accepts administrative deflection. I'm not the kind of father who remains quiet when his child is harmed. And I'm certainly not the kind of person who believes family connections should shield anyone from accountability." The door closed behind them with a soft click that somehow carried the weight of a gavel. Across the city in the penthouse office suite of Thornton Construction's downtown headquarters, Bradley Thornton was discovering exactly how badly he had miscalculated. The call had come from Harrison Webb, his attorney at Holland and Associates. A man who charged $800 hourly to deliver news clients did not want to hear. Webb's voice through the speaker carried the particular tension of a lawyer who had discovered his client's problems extended far beyond original presentations. Marcus Ashford, federal judge, 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, appointed 12 years ago. Confirmed unanimously by the Senate. His record is impeccable. Not a single reversal on appeal across over 800 cases. Bradley stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the Miami skyline his company had helped construct. The view that usually provided satisfaction now seemed to mock him, each tower a reminder of influence and connections cultivated over 30 years. Influence and connections that meant nothing against a federal judge. He was wearing a cheap jacket, driving a decade-old Honda. He looked like nobody. Webb's response carried no sympathy. "That's deliberate. He gives 60% of his salary to charity, lives well below his means. The legal community calls him the monk on the bench. He's untouchable, Bradley. Absolutely untouchable. There has to be something. Everyone has something. Not this one. His wife died 4 years ago, automobile accident. He's raising their daughter alone. His public image is spotless. His judicial record is pristine. If you had deliberately selected the single most unimpeachable person in the Florida legal system, you could not have chosen better." Bradley turned from the window, his hand finding the crystal decanter on his desk, pouring 3 fingers of bourbon despite the hour. "What about Porter? The security supervisor who handled the scene?" "That's why I called. Porter's supervisor just informed me that Judge Ashford has filed a formal complaint. He's also submitted a FOIA request for all complaints against Porter over the past decade." The bourbon stopped halfway to Bradley's lips. Why would he do that? Because he's building a case, not just against you, against the entire system that allowed this to happen. And Bradley, if those complaint records emerge, we have a much larger problem than your assault charges. A different cold settled into Bradley's stomach. Meaning, Theodore Chambers has been managing those complaints personally for 6 years. If Ashford starts excavating, he's going to discover connections reaching directly to the Chief Judge's office. Connections I suspect you know something about. Silence stretched between them, filled with implications neither man was willing to articulate. Bradley drained the bourbon. "I need to make a call." "To whom?" "Someone who can resolve this before it deteriorates further." The line went dead. Bradley reached for a different phone, the one he maintained in his bottom desk drawer for conversations that could never appear on any record. The number he dialed was burned into memory, never documented, used only in emergencies. Theodore Chambers answered on the 3rd ring. "This line is for emergencies exclusively." Bradley's response came in a rush. "This qualifies as an emergency. The man from the garage this morning, he's a federal judge, 11th Circuit. His name is Marcus Ashford." The pause that followed lasted nearly 10 seconds. When Chambers spoke again, his voice had changed, dropping into something colder and more controlled. "Tell me everything, omit nothing." Bradley recounted the morning's events, the confrontation, the assault, Porter's arrival, the complaint dismissal. With each detail, the weight of his mistake pressed harder, crushing whatever remained of earlier confidence. When he finished, Chambers was silent for a long moment. Then came a question Bradley had not anticipated. "Did you know who he was when you approached him?" "No, I swear I didn't. He looked like nobody, like some vagrant who wandered into the wrong garage." "That's what everyone thinks initially. It's deliberate. He dresses that way specifically to observe how people treat him when they don't recognize his position." Bradley felt blood drain from his face. "He was testing me, not you specifically. The system. He does it regularly. Walks into courthouses dressed like maintenance staff to observe how security responds. Files reports, constructs cases." Chambers's voice carried something that might have been respect or fear, or both. "The man is relentless. He's been problematic since he joined the bench." "Can you make this disappear?" Another pause. "Porter can handle security footage. Nancy Palmer can misplace the complaint paperwork. We've done this 73 times previously." 73 times. Details you don't require. What you need to understand is that I can contain this, but only if Ashford stops investigating. And he won't stop unless he has reason to." Bradley's hand tightened on the phone. "What kind of reason?" "Everyone values something more than their career. For Ashford, it's his daughter, 8 years old, attends Lincoln Elementary. Her name is Zola." The implication hung in the air like smoke from a fire neither man would acknowledge starting. "I'm not threatening a child. No one's threatening anyone. But information is leverage. And if Ashford understands that pursuing this case could complicate his daughter's education, her social environment, her future opportunities, he might reconsider his priorities." Bradley wanted to protest to establish a line he would not cross, but the alternative was federal charges for assaulting a judge, career destruction prison. Against those stakes, moral objections felt like luxuries he could no longer afford. His voice emerged smaller than intended. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing. You've contributed enough. Let me handle this. I've been protecting people like you for 30 years. I understand how to make problems disappear." The line went dead. Bradley stood alone with his bourbon and his reflection and the growing certainty that he had stepped into something far darker than a parking garage confrontation. Marcus spent the afternoon at the science fair watching his daughter present a damaged solar system to judges who regarded her fractured work with poorly concealed skepticism. But Zola had inherited her mother's courage along with her eyes, and she stood before them with chin raised explaining planetary orbits and gravitational forces while pointing to planets hanging at crooked angles from their damaged wires. She did not win. A boy with a functioning volcano and an engineer father claimed first place. But when judging concluded and the gymnasium began emptying, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes approached Zola with a special certificate hastily printed, but genuine. "This is for resilience in the face of adversity. Your project may not have been complete, but your courage was. Never let anyone break what matters most to you." Zola clutched the certificate with both hands, and for the first time since morning, her gap-toothed smile returned. Marcus watched from the gymnasium doorway, the weight on his chest lifting fractionally. Whatever else this day had cost his daughter had learned something precious. She had learned that destruction could be survived, that cruelty could be overcome, that the measure of a person was not in what they built, but in how they responded when others tore it down. That evening after dinner and bath time and the bedtime story that was their unbreakable ritual, Marcus sat beside Zola's bed and asked the question he had been avoiding. "Baby girl, the boy who damaged your project, Tommy, what did he say exactly?" Zola's eyes, heavy with approaching sleep, found his. He said his daddy knows everyone, that his daddy can make anyone disappear. Do you know who his daddy is? A small nod. Mr. Thornton, the building man. Tommy talks about him constantly. The name struck like a physical blow. Thornton. The same Thornton who had attacked him that morning. The same Thornton whose construction vehicles had blocked the judicial parking garage. The connection was not coincidental. It was coordinated. He kissed Zola's forehead, smoothed her braids against the pillow, and whispered their shared prayer. Bigger than the sky, baby girl. Her response was already slurring with sleep. Bigger than the sky, daddy. He waited until her breathing deepened into the rhythm of unconsciousness, then slipped from her room and closed the door. In the kitchen, his laptop waited on the table, surrounded by accumulated mail and dinner remnants. He sat down and began researching. Patricia Okonkwo answered his call on the first ring as if she had been waiting. Marcus, I received your message. What's happening? He told her everything. The garage attack, the FOIA request, the 73 complaints, the connection to Chambers, the assault on Zola, the Thornton family web that seemed to touch every aspect of his life. When he finished, Patricia was silent for a long moment. Then her voice came through with the steel that had made her one of Miami's most feared civil rights attorneys. This isn't random. Someone is targeting you. The construction blocking the judicial garage, forcing you into the public structure. That's not coincidence. Marcus had reached the same conclusion, but hearing it from Patricia made it real in ways his own suspicions had not. I need assistance building a case, not just against Thornton, against the system that enabled him. I can assist, but you need to lead. The community needs to see a black man taking charge of his own justice, not a lawyer doing it for him. He understood. This was about more than legal strategy. It was about representation, about demonstrating to others that they could fight back, that the system could be challenged by those it sought to destroy. There's something else. Patricia's voice dropped, becoming more serious. The August 23 complaint in your FOIA results. The black attorney who was asked for additional identification. What about it? That was me. I filed that complaint against Porter 18 months before he dismissed yours. It was marked inconclusive. I let it go because I had other battles to fight. The regret in her voice was palpable. I didn't know there were 72 others. I didn't know about the pattern. Marcus absorbed this. His friend, his ally in the coming fight, had herself been victimized by the system they were challenging. The connection deepened his resolve and his fury. Will you testify? I'll do more than testify. I'll help you locate the others. The 73 families. They deserve to know they're not alone. They deserve to have their voices heard. The following 2 weeks became a blur of investigation and documentation. Marcus met the victims one by one, recording their stories, preserving their testimonies, constructing the foundation of a case that grew larger with each passing day. Keisha Crawford was 34, a social worker who had taken leave to attend her brother's sentencing hearing. Her brother, charged with drug possession with intent to distribute, faced a proceeding scheduled for 9 a.m. before Judge Theodore Chambers. Keisha arrived at the courthouse at 8:45. Gerald Porter stopped her in the main lobby. He asked for my ID, then a second form. Then he said my purse looked suspicious and required searching. By the time he let me through, the hearing was concluded. My brother received 12 years. The entire proceeding lasted 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I know because I obtained the transcript later. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. A man's life decided in less time than brewing coffee. Barbara Whitmore was 52, a retired school teacher whose son had been charged with aggravated assault following a bar fight where witnesses disagreed about who threw the first punch. She had arrived early for the sentencing hearing, determined to speak on her son's behalf. Porter stood in front of the courtroom door. He told me the gallery was full. Through the window, I could see empty seats, at least 10 empty seats, but he wouldn't move. By the time someone came out and let me through, the judge had already sentenced my son to 10 years. 10 years! Her son would be 43 upon release, his best years spent behind bars while his mother grew old waiting for prison visits. Gloria Henderson was 74, her memory still sharp despite the years that had weathered her body. She received Marcus in the common room of the Homestead Care Facility, her wheelchair positioned by a window overlooking a garden she could no longer walk through. Her story extended further than the others. Back to 1997. Back to a case that preceded Marcus's appointment by 15 years. I was a housekeeper in Coral Gables. Good family, the Reinhardts, church people. No drugs in that house, not ever. But police came with a warrant, said they had a tip. 3 officers. One of them, young fellow with mean eyes, went back to his car and came out with a plastic bag. Went into the garage alone. Called the others in a minute later, saying he found something. Marcus leaned forward, his legal training recognizing the significance. You saw him plant evidence. Clear as I see you now. I told the detective who came to take my statement. Wrote it all down, he did. Said they'd investigate. And then, Gloria's eyes clouded with grief that had aged but never healed. Nothing. No one ever called. When I tried to follow up, they said my statement was lost. Said I must have been mistaken about what I saw. Do you remember the detective's name? She did not hesitate. Porter. Gerald Porter. He wasn't in that uniform yet. Deputy sheriff then. But I never forgot his face. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place, a puzzle spanning 3 decades revealing its shape. And the defendant in that case, the person arrested. Gloria's weathered hand reached out and found his grip surprisingly strong. His name was Marcus Ashford. Your uncle isn't he. I saw the resemblance the moment you walked in. The revelation should have surprised him. Instead, it settled into place with the grim inevitability of truth too long delayed. His uncle Marcus imprisoned for 8 years on fabricated evidence. His uncle Marcus, whose trial had been presided over by a young judge named Theodore Chambers. His uncle Marcus, who had died in 2021, still bearing the weight of a conviction he had done nothing to deserve. I've been waiting 27 years for someone to listen. Gloria's voice cracked with emotion. 27 years for someone to care enough to ask the right questions. Marcus covered her hand with both of his. I'm listening now. The investigation expanded beyond Miami, reaching into case files and court records throughout the 11th Circuit. Marcus worked nights after Zola went to bed, weekends when she visited her grandmother, stolen hours between judicial duties that could not be neglected. Patricia coordinated witness interviews, her legal expertise ensuring every statement was properly documented, every piece of evidence preserved according to rules that would withstand scrutiny. But the direction, the drive, the relentless pursuit of truth came from Marcus alone. Renata Holloway joined their efforts 3 weeks into the investigation. A criminal investigator with the Federal Internal Affairs Office, she had spent 14 years tracking corruption in law enforcement agencies throughout South Florida. I've been building a file on Porter for the 2 years, circumstantial evidence mostly. Patterns that didn't quite prove wrongdoing, but pointed toward something systematic. Marcus spread the FOIA results across his dining room table. 73 complaints arranged chronologically. What changed? You did. A federal judge filing a complaint submitting preservation requests citing specific statutes. You gave me the leverage I needed to expand the investigation formally. Into Porter. Renata's expression hardened. Into everyone. Porter is the gatekeeper. Chambers is the architect. But there's a third player. Someone funding the operation. Someone with enough influence to keep this buried for 3 decades. Marcus thought of Bradley Thornton of construction trucks blocking the judicial garage of the son who had attacked Zola while echoing his father's words. Thornton Construction. That's my working theory. Campaign contributions extending back 20 years. Construction contracts that somehow always get approved regardless of competitive bidding. A symbiotic relationship between a builder who needs permits and a judge who can influence which permits get granted. The scope of the conspiracy staggered Marcus. This was not simply racism, though racism permeated every layer. This was corruption so thorough it had become invisible. A shadow government operating within the legitimate one, protecting its members while crushing anyone who threatened exposure. "What do you need from me?" Renata met his eyes directly. "Patience. An investigation this large requires time. Months at minimum. If we move prematurely, if we cut corners, defense attorneys will dismantle our case. Everything must be documented, verified, unassailable." Patience. The one quality Marcus struggled most to maintain when his daughter's safety hung in the balance and his uncle's memory demanded justice. And meanwhile, you keep doing what you're doing. Build the case from your end. Interview witnesses. Preserve evidence. Make it impossible for anyone to claim this is personal vendetta rather than legitimate investigation. Marcus nodded, accepting constraints even as they chafed against his desire for immediate action. Justice moved slowly, but it moved. His career had taught him that much. What he did not know was that patience was a luxury the other side had no intention of granting. The envelope appeared on his kitchen table 4 days later. Marcus had returned home after a long day of hearings to find Zola with her grandmother, a prearranged visit that provided a rare evening to focus on investigation without parental responsibilities. The apartment was quiet, only distant traffic audible from the street below. The envelope sat on the table where he always placed his keys. Manila unmarked, sealed. He had not left it there that morning. The door had been locked when he arrived. Nothing else appeared disturbed. Someone had been inside his home. He opened the envelope with hands that remained steady through force of will. Inside a single document. A case file from 1997, yellowed with age, bearing official stamps and signatures Marcus recognized from his time in the justice system. Circuit Court of Miami-Dade County. Case number 97, CF 2247. Defendant Ashford Marcus Sr. Charge possession with intent to distribute. Disposition guilty. Sentence 8 years. His uncle's conviction delivered to his kitchen table by someone who wanted him to understand they could reach him anywhere. A note was clipped to the file typed on plain white paper. "Drop the case, or your daughter learns what really happened to her great-uncle. How much do you want to explain to an 8-year-old about prison and planted evidence and a system that destroys people who look like her?" Marcus read the note 3 times, blood running cold then hot as implications crystallized. They were threatening Zola. Not with physical harm directly, but with psychological damage of learning about family trauma before she was ready to process it. The choice they were offering was clear: protect his daughter's innocence or pursue his uncle's justice. One or the other, not both. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time, case file before him, threat note in hand, the weight of an impossible decision pressing down. Then he reached for his phone and called the one person who might understand what he was facing. Robert Ashford answered on the 4th ring. His voice graveled by age and a lifetime of cigarettes, quit too late to undo the damage. "Marcus, it's after midnight. Everything okay?" Marcus told him about the envelope, about the case file, about the threat, and then he asked the question that had haunted him since Gloria Henderson spoke his uncle's name. "Dad, tell me about Uncle Marcus. Tell me what really happened." Silence on the line stretched so long Marcus thought the connection had failed. When his father finally spoke, his voice carried weariness that went deeper than age. "Your uncle made mistakes. We all did. But what happened to him wasn't just his mistakes. The drugs they found weren't his. He was holding them for someone he thought was a friend, someone who turned out to be a police informant. The whole thing was a sting operation that went sideways. Marcus took the fall because no one believed him. No one wanted to believe him. And you never told me. What was I supposed to say? That the system you wanted to serve destroyed your uncle, that the robes you wear were worn by a man who sentenced an innocent person to 8 years. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. Who was the judge? Another pause longer. Does it matter? Who was the judge, Dad? The answer came barely above a whisper. Theodore Chambers, 40 years old, ambitious, looking to make a name with tough-on-crime sentences. Your mentor, your champion. The world tilted. Marcus sat in darkness and felt everything he believed about his career, his path, his place in the justice system, rearranging into a new and terrible shape. Chambers had sentenced his uncle to 8 years for a crime he did not commit. Chambers had known based on evidence Gloria described that the conviction was based on planted evidence. And Chambers had spent 12 years mentoring the nephew of his victim, grooming Marcus for advancement, watching over his career like a guardian angel with blood on his hands. Why? What possible reason could explain such behavior? His father's voice answered the unasked question. He called me, you know, the week you were appointed to the bench. Said he wanted me to know he remembered Marcus, that he hoped the family could move forward, that he would be watching over your career. Guilt. The answer was guilt. Chambers had spent 27 years carrying the weight of what he had done, and he had chosen to atone not by confessing, but by elevating the nephew of his victim. Every recommendation, every positive review, every advancement Marcus had achieved bore fingerprints of a man trying to balance scales that could never truly balance. I thought I was protecting you. His father's voice cracked. I thought if you knew you'd never take the bench, and I wanted you to succeed where Marcus couldn't. I wanted something good to come from all that pain. Marcus closed his eyes, absorbing the revelation, processing implications. His entire career had been shadowed by a crime he never knew about, guided by hands stained with his family's suffering. Uncle Marcus, when did he die? 2021. Heart complications from his time inside. They say prison aged him 20 years. He was 57 but looked 80. A rattling breath. He never knew you became a judge, Marcus. Never knew his nephew had any success at all. We lost touch after he got out. He didn't want to see anyone. Didn't want to be reminded of what he'd lost. And his conviction, his record, still stands. He died a convicted felon. Never cleared, never pardoned, never even acknowledged. Marcus opened his eyes. The case file sat before him, his uncle's name printed at the top in faded type. 27 years of injustice, and now someone was using it as leverage to ensure another 27 years of silence. His voice was steady when he spoke again. I have to go, Dad. I'll call you tomorrow. Marcus, what are you going to do? The question hung between them. Father and son separated by miles and secrets, and the weight of family tragedy neither had known how to address. What I should have done years ago. What someone should have done the day they convicted an innocent man. He ended the call and sat alone in darkness, threat note in one hand, phone in the other. The message had been clear. Back off or face consequences. Protect Zola's innocence or pursue justice for Marcus Sr. But the people who sent that message had made a critical miscalculation. They assumed Marcus Ashford would choose safety over truth, comfort over righteousness, protection of one child over vindication of countless victims. They did not understand who they were dealing with. He picked up the phone and dialed Patricia's number. When she answered, he spoke without preamble. The scope of this case just expanded. I need everything you can find on Theodore Chambers going back 30 years. Every case he ever tried, every complaint ever filed, every connection between his courtroom and Gerald Porter. Marcus, that's going to take months. Then we start tonight. Another call, this one to Renata Holloway. Someone broke into my apartment, left evidence from my uncle's 1997 case. A threat to expose family history to my daughter if I don't back off. Renata's response was immediate. I'm sending a forensics team. Don't touch anything else. And Marcus, this confirms what I suspected. There's a third player coordinating everything. Chambers and Porter wouldn't have resources for surveillance and break-ins. Someone with money is pulling strings. Thornton? Almost certainly. But we need proof. Without documentation, without witnesses willing to testify, all we have is circumstantial inference. Marcus looked at the case file at documents meant to intimidate him into silence. Instead, they had provided something far more valuable. I have a witness, Gloria Henderson, 74 years old, living in Homestead. She saw Porter plant evidence in my uncle's case in 1997. She's been waiting 27 years for someone to listen. Silence on the line was profound. Then Renata spoke, her voice carrying something that might have been hope. That's significant. If her testimony is credible, if we can corroborate even part of what she says, we can tie Porter to evidence tampering going back 3 decades. That destroys any claim that current complaints are isolated incidents. There's more. I have 73 other victims willing to come forward. Women who were harassed by Porter, blocked from attending hearings, made to feel they didn't belong in their own courthouse. Each one connected to a case before Chambers. Renata was quiet for a moment. Marcus, do you understand what you're describing? A 30-year conspiracy involving a sitting chief judge, a security supervisor, and potentially one of the largest construction companies in South Florida. If this goes federal, if DOJ gets involved, we're talking about a racketeering investigation that could dismantle half the 11th Circuit. Then we make sure it goes federal. And we make sure every piece of evidence is so thoroughly documented that no defense attorney can challenge it. That level of preparation takes time. Then we use the time. No shortcuts, no compromises. We build a case so airtight that Theodore Chambers spends his remaining years in the prison where my uncle died. The third manila envelope arrived by courier the following week. Yolanda Fitzgerald's name was nowhere on the return address, but Marcus recognized the handwriting on the note inside. The courthouse's most senior court reporter had been watching and documenting for 22 years, building her own file, waiting for someone with authority to act on what she knew. The envelope contained a key and a photograph. The key was old brass with a small plastic tag reading B7. The photograph showed 2 men shaking hands at what appeared to be a political fundraiser. A banner in the background read, Miami-Dade County Democratic Party Annual Gala 1996. One man was Theodore Chambers, 28 years younger, dark-haired, already wearing the expression of someone destined for power. The other was Gerald Porter, also younger, his deputy sheriff's uniform crisp and new. The note beneath the photograph was handwritten. They have known each other since the beginning. Room B7 is in the basement. What you're looking for is inside. 2 days later, Marcus and Renata descended into a part of the federal courthouse most employees never visited. The basement level extended far beyond mechanical rooms and storage areas, appearing on official floor plans a labyrinth of forgotten spaces where institutional secrets could decay undisturbed for decades. Room B7 was at the end of a long corridor, past humming boilers and dusty file cabinets untouched in years. The door was locked, but the key from Yolanda's envelope turned smoothly as if waiting for exactly this moment. The room was small, perhaps 15 feet square, every inch of wall space occupied by filing cabinets. Gray metal, institutional, unmarked. Dozens of them standing in rows like silent witnesses to decades of buried truth. Marcus opened the nearest drawer. Folders. Hundreds of folders, each containing a complaint. A witness statement, a piece of evidence removed from official records and hidden from scrutiny. 30 years of secrets. 30 years of silenced voices. all of it preserved in this forgotten room, waiting for someone to find it. His hands found a folder at random and pulled it open. The name on the label froze his blood. Ashford Marcus Sr. Inside were documents Gloria had described. Witness statements removed before trial. Her testimony describing what she had seen in the Reinhardt garage. 2 other statements from neighbors who had noticed the same discrepancy. And beneath the statements, a handwritten note in ink that had faded but remained legible. Per TC. Remove from official file. Not relevant to prosecution. TC. Theodore Chambers. Marcus stared at the note at the casual dismissal of evidence that could have freed his uncle at the calculated cruelty of a judge who knew he was convicting an innocent man and chose to proceed anyway. Renata appeared at his shoulder, face pale in fluorescent light. There are over 400 files here. 400 cases. 400 people whose complaints were buried, whose evidence was hidden, whose lives were destroyed by a system that was supposed to protect them. Marcus surveyed the cabinets, the magnitude of what they had discovered. This was no longer a case. This was an indictment of an entire era of justice in Miami-Dade County. We photograph everything, document everything, create a chain of custody no one can challenge. That will take days. Then we take days. We do this right or we don't do it at all. Work began immediately. Renata summoned additional investigators. Patricia brought in legal assistants who could process documents without compromising evidentiary value. Marcus oversaw every step, his judicial training ensuring protocols were followed, procedures documented, nothing left to chance. 4 days later, they had cataloged 417 complaints dating to 1992. 73 fell within the statute of limitations for civil rights prosecution. 23 involved evidence strong enough to support criminal charges. And 1, the oldest, contained documentation sufficient to exonerate Marcus Ashford Sr. posthumously. The case was ready. On the evening before the Federal Judicial Commission hearing, Marcus sat on a park bench watching Zola play on swings. The sun was setting over Miami, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, reflecting off glass towers his adversaries had built. She was laughing, pumping her legs to go higher, braids flying behind her like streamers. 8 years old and still innocent, still unaware of darkness that had touched their lives, still believing good people eventually won and bad people eventually lost. He wanted to preserve that innocence. He wanted to shield her from every ugly truth the world contained. But he also wanted to demonstrate what courage looked like, what justice demanded, what it meant to fight for something larger than yourself. She spotted him watching and waved her gap-toothed grin visible even from 20 feet away. He waved back, heart aching with love and fear and fierce determination. Later, after dinner and homework and the evening ritual of story time, Zola asked the question he had been dreading. "Daddy, you've been sad lately. Different sad than when Mommy died." He sat on the edge of her bed, searching for words that would tell enough truth without revealing too much. "Daddy has to do something important tomorrow. Something hard. Some people might say things about me afterward. Things that aren't true. Why would they lie? Because sometimes people lie when they're afraid of the truth, when they've done something wrong and don't want to face consequences." Zola considered this with seriousness. "Are you afraid?" Marcus thought about the question, about the magnitude of what tomorrow would bring, about enemies who would stop at nothing to protect themselves. Then he thought about his uncle dying in obscurity, never vindicated, about Gloria Henderson waiting decades for someone to believe her, about 73 families denied justice for years. "I'm more scared of not doing it than of doing it. Some things are worth being afraid of. Some things are worth fighting for, even when fighting is hard." Zola reached out and took his hand. "Will you be safe?" "I'll be careful." "That's not the same thing." Her perception never failed to astonish him. 8 years old and already wise beyond her years. You're right. It's not. But sometimes we have to do hard things because they're right. You remember what Mommy used to say? Zola's eyes glistened. Bigger than the sky. Bigger than the sky, baby girl. The love, the justice, the truth, all of it. He kissed her forehead and switched off the lamp, leaving only nightlight glow to push back darkness. At the door he paused and looked back at his daughter. His whole world, the reason every fight was worth fighting. Good night, baby girl. Her response was barely audible, already half asleep. Good night, Daddy. He closed the door and walked to the kitchen where the window offered a view of Miami skyline transformed by evening lights. Somewhere out there, construction crews were finishing work. Somewhere, families were rebuilding lives damaged by the system he had helped expose. Somewhere, the work he had started was continuing, carried forward by people who had found their voices because someone had finally listened. Tomorrow, he would walk into the Federal Judicial Commission with 237 pages of evidence. Tomorrow, he would expose a 30-year conspiracy that had destroyed countless lives, including his own family's. What he did not know as he stood in his kitchen was that 3 men were already positioning themselves in the courthouse hallway, armed with instructions to ensure he never reached the podium. Theodore Chambers had spent 30 years making problems disappear. He was not about to let one federal judge destroy everything he had built. The morning air carried the sharp clarity of a South Florida winter temperatures in the low 60s, the kind of weather that made everything feel possible. Marcus Ashford stepped out of his Honda Civic at 7:45, briefcase in hand, wearing the gray tweed jacket that had become his signature. The courthouse rose before him, limestone and glass scales of justice carved above the entrance, like a promise the building had not always kept. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Renata's team swept the building at 6. 3 unknown males identified in East Hallway near Commission Room. Federal marshals are aware. Enter through West Security Check-in. Marshals will intercept the men before your testimony begins. 3 men. The obstruction Chambers had arranged, now identified and contained by investigators who had anticipated the threat. Marcus adjusted his grip on the briefcase containing 237 pages of evidence and walked toward the west entrance. The security checkpoint was staffed by unfamiliar faces, new personnel brought in specifically for this morning's hearing. The compromised guards had been placed on administrative leave, their loyalties too uncertain to trust with anything this important. A young woman with a federal marshal's badge checked his identification, her expression shifting when she read his name. Judge Ashford, we've been expecting you. This way, please. She led him through a side corridor that bypassed the main lobby entirely, a route unknown to anyone who might be waiting to intercept him. As they walked, her radio crackled with a brief transmission. East hallway secure. 3 subjects in custody. Questioning in progress. The marshal glanced at Marcus. The men we identified earlier. They've been detained and are being questioned about who sent them. Their phones have been seized as evidence. Marcus nodded relief, mixing with grim satisfaction. Chambers had overplayed his hand. The attempt to obstruct justice would become additional evidence in the case against him. At the door to the commission hearing room, the marshal paused. The chairman is ready. Media has been seated. Everything is in place. Marcus pushed through the doors into the room where his career had been shaped and would now be transformed. The Federal Judicial Commission hearing room occupied the 7th floor, a space designed to intimidate with high ceilings and wood-paneled walls. Portraits of former chief judges lined the perimeter, painted eyes watching proceedings that would determine the fate of their successors. Theodore Chambers' portrait hung nearest the chairman's seat, a position of honor that would be removed before day's end. 50 people filled the gallery, a mixture of journalists, attorneys, and family members of the 73 victims whose stories had brought everyone here. Keisha Crawford sat in the front row, clutching a photograph of her brother. Barbara Whitmore occupied the seat beside her. Gloria Henderson had been wheeled in by an aide from the care facility, her eyes bright with anticipation. At the defendant's table, Theodore Chambers sat with his attorney, a high-priced specialist in judicial ethics, who had never lost a client to removal. The specialist's expression suggested he was about to experience his first defeat. Chambers himself had aged visibly in weeks since the investigation became public. His silver hair had thinned, his shoulders curved inward as if protecting something vital. He did not look at Marcus when the younger judge entered. The chairman called proceedings to order at precisely 9 o'clock. This commission has convened to hear evidence regarding allegations of misconduct against Chief Judge Theodore Chambers. Judge Marcus Ashford has requested opportunity to present testimony. Judge Ashford, you may proceed. Marcus rose and approached the podium at the center of the room. The briefcase sat beside him unopened. He would not need it. Every piece of evidence, every name, every date had been committed to memory. He began without preamble. Chairman, members of the commission, I appear before you today not as an accuser but as a witness. What I am about to present represents collective testimony of 73 individuals whose complaints were suppressed, buried, and ignored by the very system designed to protect them. Their voices were silenced for decades. Today, they will finally be heard. The room fell silent. Not boredom or distraction, but collective breath held in anticipation. On March 15th of this year, I was assaulted in the courthouse parking garage by Bradley Thornton, CEO of Thornton Construction. When I attempted to report the assault, Security Supervisor Gerald Porter canceled my 911 dispatch and dismissed my complaint. I later discovered my experience was not isolated. It was part of a pattern spanning 3 decades and affecting hundreds of citizens who sought justice in this courthouse. He let the words settle. Case 1. Keisha Crawford, March 23, 2023. Her brother, Marcus Crawford, was charged with drug possession with intent to distribute. Ms. Crawford arrived at the courthouse 45 minutes before her brother's sentencing hearing. Gerald Porter detained her at the security checkpoint, requesting additional identification, searching her purse for non-existent contraband. By the time she was permitted to proceed, the hearing had concluded. Her brother received 12 years. The proceeding lasted 2 minutes and 14 seconds. The presiding judge was Theodore Chambers. In the front row, Keisha Crawford's shoulders shook with silent weeping. Case 2. Barbara Whitmore, January 7, 2024. Her son Raymond Whitmore was charged with aggravated assault. Ms. Whitmore arrived early for the sentencing hearing, prepared to speak on her son's behalf. Porter stood in front of the courtroom door and told her the gallery was full. Through the window, she could see 10 empty seats. By the time another bailiff intervened, the judge had already sentenced her son to 10 years. The presiding judge was Theodore Chambers. Barbara reached for Keisha's hand, and the two women held on to each other as their stories were spoken aloud for the first time in official proceedings. Marcus did not pause. Case after case flowed from memory, names and dates and circumstances, a catalog of injustice building upon itself until the weight became unbearable. Case 17. Denise Williams, June 4, 2021. Case 34. Robert Jackson, September 12, 2019. Case 51. Angela Thompson, February 28, 2018. Case 73. Patricia Okonkwo, August 19, 2022. A licensed attorney was asked for 3 forms of identification before being allowed to enter the courthouse where she had practiced for 15 years. Her complaint was marked resolved with no action required. The supervisor who dismissed her complaint was Gerald Porter. The judge who signed off on the dismissal was Theodore Chambers. Patricia sat in the gallery, expression composed but eyes glistening. The commission members sat motionless, faces reflecting horror at what they were hearing. 73 cases, 73 families, 73 instances where the courthouse had become an instrument of oppression. Marcus paused, allowing silence to carry the weight of what he had presented. Then he delivered the revelation that would transform everything. But these 73 cases represent only the most recent chapter of a conspiracy spanning 3 decades. In 1997, a man named Marcus Ashford Sr. was arrested for drug possession with intent to distribute. 3 witnesses came forward with testimony suggesting evidence had been planted by the arresting officer. Their statements were taken documented and filed with the prosecutor's office. He met Chambers' eyes for the first time. Those witness statements were removed from official record before trial. The notation authorizing their removal reads, "Per TC, not relevant to prosecution." The defendant was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. He served his full sentence. He died in 2021 without ever knowing his name had been cleared, without ever knowing the evidence that convicted him was fabricated. Whispers erupted into audible murmurs. Commission members exchanged glances. Journalists scribbled furiously. The arresting officer who planted that evidence was Deputy Gerald Porter before his transfer to courthouse security. The judge who presided over the trial and authorized removal of exculpatory evidence was Theodore Chambers, then 40 years old. Marcus's voice shifted, becoming more personal. Marcus Ashford Sr. was my uncle. I never knew him well. I never knew what happened to him until 3 weeks ago, when documents from room B7 in this courthouse's basement revealed truth that had been hidden for 27 years. My mentor, the man who shepherded my career from the beginning, sentenced my uncle to prison for a crime he did not commit. And then he spent 3 decades ensuring no one would ever discover what he had done. Theodore Chambers sat perfectly still, face drained of color, attorney frozen beside him. Marcus turned to address the room at large. Room B7 contained 417 files. 417 complaints buried, hidden, removed from official records. 30 years of voices silenced. 30 years of justice denied. The documentation we recovered is now in federal custody. I have been informed the Department of Justice will be opening a formal investigation into civil rights violations spanning 3 decades. He returned attention to the commission. I did not come here seeking vengeance. I came here seeking truth. The 73 families in this room have waited years for someone to believe them. The 400 others whose complaints never saw daylight deserve to know their stories matter. And my uncle, who died believing the system had failed him, deserves to have his name cleared. His final words fell into silence like stones into still water. The question before this commission is not whether Theodore Chambers should be removed from the bench. That outcome is inevitable. The question is whether this institution has the courage to acknowledge what happened within its walls and take meaningful steps to ensure it never happens again. The families in this room are watching. The community is watching. History is watching. Marcus gathered his briefcase and returned to his seat. The chairman cleared his throat, visibly shaken. Chief Judge Chambers, you have the right to respond to these allegations. Chambers rose slowly, movements those of a man carrying weight too heavy to bear. His attorney reached for his arm, attempting to guide him toward prepared remarks, but Chambers shook off assistance. 27 years ago, I made a decision that haunts me to this day. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself the system required difficult choices. I told myself one man's freedom mattered less than maintaining order. The room held its breath. I was wrong. I was wrong about Marcus Ashford Sr. I was wrong about the 73 complaints I helped bury. I was wrong about every decision that prioritized my career over lives of people I swore to serve. His eyes found Marcus across the room. I cannot undo what I did. I cannot return the years stolen from your uncle. But I can tell truth finally after all this time. Gerald Porter planted evidence on my instruction. Witness statements were removed because they would have proven innocence. Every complaint that disappeared was signed off by me personally. His attorney's face had gone the color of ash. I also ordered 3 men to intercept Judge Ashford this morning, to prevent him from testifying. I understand they have been detained. That was my final attempt to suppress truth that has been hidden too long. The admission sent shockwaves through the gallery. Commission members leaned forward. Journalists exchanged astonished glances. I resign from my position as Chief Judge effective immediately. I will cooperate fully with any federal investigation, and I will accept whatever consequences this commission deems appropriate. He sat down without another word. The chairman spoke, voice carrying the gravity of the moment. This commission accepts Chief Judge Chambers' resignation based on evidence presented and his own admission of wrongdoing, including the attempted obstruction revealed today. We are referring this matter to the United States Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Chief Judge Theodore Chambers, you are remanded into federal custody pending charges. 2 federal marshals who had been standing at the back moved forward. Chambers offered his wrists without resistance. Handcuffs clicked shut with a sound echoing through the chamber, like the closing of a door that had been open for 30 years. As marshals led him toward the exit, Chambers paused beside Marcus's seat. Their eyes met, and something passed between them that defied simple categorization. Guilt, regret, the terrible weight of consequences finally arriving. "I'm sorry." The words were barely audible. "I know it's not enough, but I am sorry." Marcus did not respond. There was nothing to say. Some apologies could never be sufficient, some wounds too deep for words to heal. The marshals guided Chambers through the doors, and the room erupted into chaos of journalists shouting questions and family members embracing and release of decades of suppressed grief. Gloria Henderson's wheelchair had been positioned at the end of her row. When Marcus approached, she reached up with both hands and took his face between weathered palms. 27 years I waited. 27 years I prayed someone would listen. Tears carved paths through wrinkles earned by decades of patience. Your uncle would be so proud of the man you became. Marcus knelt beside her chair. You never gave up. Through all those years, you never stopped believing truth would come out. Truth doesn't die, child. It just waits for someone brave enough to speak it. The aftermath unfolded across months like ripples from a stone dropped into still water. Gerald Porter resigned before his termination hearing could convene accepting reduced pension rather than face accumulated evidence. His 11-year career in courthouse security ended with the quiet shame of a man whose choices had finally caught up with him. He relocated to a small town in the Florida Panhandle, far from the jurisdiction where his name had become synonymous with corruption. The 3 men detained at the courthouse that morning cooperated with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. Their testimony confirmed that Chambers had hired them through an intermediary paying $20,000 each to prevent Marcus from reaching the hearing room. The evidence became another count in the federal indictment. Bradley Thornton faced his own reckoning in a different courtroom. Assault charges, initially reduced through legal maneuvering to misdemeanors, were upgraded to felonies when his connection to the broader conspiracy became clear. 18 months in state prison for assault on a judicial officer, 3 years probation, $500,000 in fines, and destruction of a reputation 3 generations had built. Lydia Thornton received 500 hours of community service for filing a false police report, a sentence she would complete in the very courthouse where her husband's crimes had been exposed. Thornton Construction, built on contracts secured through political connections and compromised judges, began to crumble. Investigations revealed patterns of bid rigging and permit manipulation spanning 2 decades. Within 6 months, the company had filed for bankruptcy, assets liquidated to pay settlements. The Department of Justice investigation expanded beyond Miami, reaching into 7 counties where similar patterns of complaint suppression had been identified. A consent decree mandated sweeping reforms to the 11th Circuit's security protocols, new hiring practices, mandatory bias training, civilian oversight boards with power to investigate complaints independently. Renata Holloway was promoted to lead the regional task force responsible for implementing reforms. Patricia Okonkwo established a legal clinic specifically for families affected by the conspiracy, providing free representation to anyone whose case had been tainted by Chambers's courtroom or Porter's checkpoint. The 73 families whose complaints had been buried received formal acknowledgments from the federal judiciary. 23 cases were reopened for review. 31 sentences were reduced. 19 convictions were overturned entirely. Among the 19 was Marcus Ashford Sr., exonerated posthumously. Theodore Chambers pleaded guilty to federal charges 6 months after his arrest. The hearing lasted 47 minutes. Conspiracy to deprive citizens of civil rights, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, attempted obstruction of federal proceedings. The judge presiding over his sentencing delivered the verdict without sympathy. Theodore Chambers, you swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. For 30 years you violated that oath systematically, deliberately, and with full knowledge of harm you were causing. Your final act was attempting to prevent testimony that would expose your crimes. The court sentences you to 18 months in federal custody, followed by 5 years of supervised release and $500,000 in restitution. Chambers received the sentence without visible reaction. As marshals moved to escort him from the courtroom, he turned one final time toward where Marcus sat in the gallery. No words passed between them. The arc of justice had bent finally in the direction it had always been meant to travel. 18 months after the garage attack on a Saturday afternoon, when Miami autumn had cooled the air enough to make outdoor activities pleasant, Marcus walked along the beach with his daughter. Zola was almost 9 now, taller than she had been when everything began. Her gap-toothed grin replaced by the beginnings of a young woman's smile. She ran ahead through the surf braids, flying laughter carried by salt-tinged breeze. The months since the hearing had changed her in ways both visible and subtle. She understood more about the world now, about struggles her father faced, about history that had shaped their family. Some of that understanding had come through difficult conversations Marcus would have preferred to delay. But children grew regardless of parents' wishes, and Zola had handled revelations with maturity that continued to astonish him. She stopped at the water's edge, pointing toward something in the distance. "Daddy, look." He followed her gesture to a building rising on the shore a quarter-mile down the beach. Construction crews swarmed around scaffolding outlining what would become the Denise Ashford Community Center, a facility funded by restitution payments and private donations. The center would provide legal assistance to families facing discrimination. It would offer counseling services to victims of judicial misconduct. It would house archives of Room B7 preserved as both evidence and memorial. And it would bear the name of the woman whose memory had sustained Marcus through the darkest moments. "Is that for Mommy?" Marcus moved to stand beside his daughter, hand finding hers. "It's for Mommy, and for your great-uncle Marcus, and for all the families who needed someone to believe them." Zola considered this with characteristic seriousness. "They believed because of you. You made them see truth. They believed because truth was there all along. I just helped them find words to say it." "That's the same thing." He smiled at her perception. "Maybe it is." They walked in silence for a while, waves lapping at their feet, construction sounds fading as they moved along shoreline. The sky stretched in shades of orange and purple sun, descending toward the horizon. "Daddy?" Her voice was thoughtful. "Did we change the world?" Marcus looked at the community center taking shape in the distance. He thought about 73 families finally heard, about 400 cases being reviewed, about consent decrees reforming courthouse security throughout South Florida, about his uncle's name cleared at last. "We changed our corner of it, and that's how it starts. One corner at a time, one family at a time, one truth at a time, until eventually the whole world has shifted." Bigger than the sky. The phrase unlocked something in his chest release of tension he had not realized he was still carrying. Bigger than the sky, baby girl. The love, the justice, the truth, all of it. Zola squeezed his hand and smiled, her mother's eyes reflecting fading light. That evening, after dinner and homework and ritual conversations that had become their shared routine, Marcus tucked his daughter into bed. Her room had changed over 18 months. The science fair certificate hung framed on the wall, reminder of resilience. Photographs of the beach and community center construction joined childhood decorations. A newspaper clipping about the case occupied a place of honor on her desk. Judge Bear still rested on her pillow, worn with age and love, the last tangible connection to her mother's physical presence. "Daddy," her voice was sleepy but content. "Will you tell me a story? What kind of story? Tell me about Mommy, about how she made you brave." It was a new request, different from the stories of their courtship she usually asked for. Marcus settled onto the edge of her bed, considering how to answer. "Your mother wasn't afraid of anything. When she saw something wrong, she spoke up. When someone needed help, she helped them. She used to say that courage wasn't about not being scared. It was about being scared and doing the right thing anyway." "Is that what you did with the courthouse and the judge?" "I tried to. I thought about her every day during those months. I thought about what she would want me to do. And the answer was always the same. Tell the truth. Help the families. Don't let fear win." Zola's eyes were drifting closed. "I want to be brave like Mommy. Like you. You already are, baby girl. You stood up in front of those judges with your broken project and you didn't quit. That was brave. That was exactly what Mommy would have done." A sleepy smile crossed her face. "Bigger than the sky. Bigger than the sky." He kissed her forehead, switched off the lamp, and moved toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at his daughter, at the child who had given him strength to fight, whose future had been worth every risk. "Good night, baby girl." "Good night, Daddy." He closed the door softly and walked to the kitchen, where the window offered a view of Miami skyline transformed by evening lights. Somewhere out there, construction crews were finishing work on the community center. Somewhere, families were rebuilding lives damaged by the system he had helped expose. Somewhere, work he had started was continuing, carried forward by people who had found their voices because someone had finally listened. The certificate of his uncle's exoneration hung on the wall beside the kitchen table next to a photograph of Marcus Sr. taken before his arrest. A young man with hope in his eyes, no knowledge of suffering ahead. "We did it, Uncle Marcus." The words were soft, meant only for the photograph. "We cleared your name. We changed the system. We made sure what happened to you can never happen to anyone else." The photograph did not respond, but Marcus imagined he could feel something shift in the air, release of tension that had persisted for 27 years. His uncle had died without vindication, but he had not died without legacy. His suffering had become foundation of reforms that would protect generations to come. That was the nature of justice Marcus understood now. It did not always arrive in time to save those who had been wronged, but it could arrive in time to prevent the same wrong from repeating. It could honor the fallen by protecting the living. It could transform tragedy into purpose. He poured himself a glass of water and sat at the table, surrounded by quiet of his apartment and distant sounds of a city continuing its endless life. 18 months since the parking garage. 18 months since Bradley Thornton had grabbed his arm and set everything in motion. 18 months of investigation and testimony and consequences that had reshaped the judicial landscape of South Florida. And now, finally, something like peace. Not the peace of forgetting. Memories remained, injuries and insults and moments of fear accumulated through the long fight. But peace of completion. Peace of knowing everything he could do had been done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The consent decree required ongoing oversight. The community center needed continued fundraising. Patricia's legal clinic was already overwhelmed with cases. There would always be more work, more battles, more opportunities to bend the arc of justice toward its proper course. But tonight, he could rest. He finished his water-checked locks on the doors and walked down the hallway to his bedroom. The photograph of Denise watched him from the nightstand as he changed and settled into bed, her smile unchanged across years since her death. "We're okay, Dee. Zola and I. We're okay." Then sleep came slowly as it always did when his mind was full, but when it arrived it was deep and dreamless, the rest of a man who had completed what he set out to do. Outside his window, the Miami skyline glittered with a million lights, each one representing a life, a family, a story waiting to be told. Some of those stories would involve injustice. Some would involve suffering no system could prevent. But more of them now would involve courts that listened and security officers who protected, and judges who remembered their oaths. That was the change Marcus Ashford had helped create. That was his legacy, greater than any verdict he had ever delivered, more lasting than any sentence he had ever imposed. The community center would bear his wife's name. The exoneration would bear his uncle's name. But the reforms, the shifts in policy and practice and culture, those would bear no name at all. They would simply become the way things were done, the expected behavior, the standard against which future courts would be measured. That was the best kind of legacy, the kind that disappeared into normalcy, the kind that became so integrated into daily life that no one remembered it had ever been different. Marcus Ashford, 47 years old, had changed his corner of the world. And in her room down the hall, surrounded by accumulated evidence of resilience and hope, Zola Ashford slept peacefully, dreaming of futures made possible by her father's courage. Bigger than the sky. All of it. Forever.